Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you're here live or if you're here on the recording. This is our Filmmaker Q&A for At Your Cervix. And it's fun for Renee and I to get to do this because, we're sort of busy behind the scenes, behind the computer, running around, doing other things. So it's actually nice to take a minute to slow down for a little bit and talk with people about the film, answer questions, and just share a little bit about what it has been to make this film. So I'm Imagine. I'm the director, producer, and co-writer with Renee. Let you say hello.
I'm Renee Bergan. I'm co-producer, co-writer, one of the cinematographers, and the final editor.
Yeah. So yeah. So really the two of us brought this thing to completion. This was a long haul. This was a long project. I was trying to hide how long it took for a while, and I've just given up on that because people always want to ask anyway. So we'll just be really transparent and say we started in 2004. That was when the first meetings about the film, like the nascent stages, happened. And we started our principal photography in 2005.
You should probably clarify
So
who the we is in this, because
yeah.
it wasn't this we.
It was not this we. So Renee has been on the project for how many years now? A lot of years,
I
even.
jumped in
Not as many, but
2016 is when I jumped in. Yeah.
2016. So Renee's been here for quite some time. I am the only person that really was here from the beginning all the way to the end. There was another co-producer, Julie, whose idea the film was, Julie Carlson. She gathered myself and 3 other gynecological teaching associates and said, I really think we need to make a film about the GTA work. This is an important story. It's important history. It's an important piece of labor in this country nobody knows about. And we were all really on board with that. We tended to be like the more activist minded GTAs. I would say in general, GTAs have like some real consciousness about politics in the world and medicine. I don't think we're like your run of the mill, like head in the sand kind of people. But I would say the folks she brought together were more activist minded. And so at first we really thought we were making a film about the GTA work because it felt worthy of its own story. And then as I said in the film, for those of you who have hopefully gotten to see it already, we did the research. We started to see what was happening around using people's bodies while they were under anesthesia to teach, or have students practice. And I use those words very loosely and in quotes, and I'm happy to answer more questions about that if people want to talk about it. But that practice of using people while under anesthesia was very common for teaching students. And so we knew we had to also tell that story. And then that story ultimately ended up taking more of the centerpiece of the film. We had a third storyline that happened that I'll just mention. Julie Carlson, while we were in this process of starting and beginning to make this film, went to midwifery school. And then she was being asked to do peer pelvics as a way of learning and practicing, meaning that as students, they were expected to do exams on each other. And in her particular case, they actually even tested the students on their pelvic exam skills while doing a pelvic exam on a student colleague. So lots of problems with that as well. Certainly privacy issues, power dynamics, to have a professor in the room literally taking notes on your pelvic exam skills while you're doing an exam on a student colleague who of course you want to have pass, you want them to do well, right? You can see how it would be easy for students to also not say, hey, that's hurting. Could you stop? Could you readjust? And of course, the students weren't trained how to do that either. So that was an entire third storyline we wanted to include in the film. But ultimately, after Renee had come on board as a co-producer, we did a test screening of the cut we had, which was like 85 minutes at the time. And we tested it in front of an invited audience in San Francisco. And after we got the feedback, we just realized it was just too much. It wasn't working. It was too convoluted. It was too many stories. And it confused the issue. I think diluted it a little bit. And so we made the really hard decision to cut that entire storyline after we'd been traveling to San Francisco to do all these shoots. And yeah, it was hard. It was a, what in film, what they call the kill your darlings moment, where you have to kill your darlings, meaning, oh, but I just love that part of the film, or that's just like the coolest line, or it's the funniest scene. And that if that scene or that portion of the film is not really serving the greater story, it has to go. So it's a really hard moment for any filmmaker. Every filmmaker goes through it when they make films. There's a moment where you have to make those hard decisions. And that was a really hard one for us, but I think it made a much better film. So we do still have that stuff. We may release it in some other way. I was recently at a medical student conference where I heard DO students talking about learning on each other. And I hadn't heard that medical students did that as much. I'd always just really heard that nursing, midwifery students did that. So, which also there's a sexist component to that, because those are traditionally women. And, I would say that's changing more. There's certainly queer and non-binary folks and trans folks in nursing, and some cis men, but, overwhelmingly that was a field dominated by women. So I do think that's an aspect of that as well. So anyway, that's really like the basic trajectory that this film took. After that moment, we were able to cut 25 minutes off the film. It was huge. And then work towards the finish line. And shortly after that, Renee came on board as the editor to help us really complete this project. It still took longer than we wanted, but I don't know. What would you like to say about that? And welcome to people that are coming in. And yes, that is crazy. Please do feel free to use the chat for people who are here. Pop your questions, thoughts, comments. We love it. I love the chat. That's great. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll open it up if people want to unmute and just ask us questions at some point. That's fine too. So yeah, anyway, that's my short version of a very long project. What do you want to add to that?
I mean, yeah, for you, it's been almost 20 years now and it's still going. Actually, I came on before that we cut the pier pelvic scene, because that was the San Francisco. So yeah, I had been working on that part as well.
Okay.
But yeah, like Imagine said, it can be really challenging, because particularly when you're so close to a project like the two of us are, it's really hard to kind of see through things and know what is no longer serving the film. So we did end up hiring an editing consultant, which was amazing, best $800 we spent. Who just gave us so much time, watched the film several times, gave us pages of notes. We had like a 2 or 3 hour conversation with him going through the film. And I think that also very much helped, because again, not that we couldn't do it on our own, but we were just so in it. Sometimes you just need to step away or have somebody else come in who's with the fresh eyes to give you perspective. And I mean, it was great to hear. He was saying we were like 85% done, which was like awesome. I think I want to touch a little bit about, and I just want to say hi to a couple of people in here that I know. Hi, I won't name you, but
Welcome.
I think one of the things that really changed from before I came on to after I came on was we were finally able to find some patients who had actually experienced undergoing a non-consensual pelvic exam while under anesthesia. And it's really challenging to find that, because you're not awake. You don't know if it's happened. And if you saw the film, you saw the 3 examples of people who had it, which are all very different. One of them was even a nurse at the facility where it happened, which for me, and I think for our team, was shocking, that her colleagues wouldn't even think twice about that. So that was a really, I think for us, that was a really pivotal change in terms of the structure of the film, because then we had some concrete examples with which then to revolve all these, not to say there are concrete examples with medical students, but there's something also then about having also then patients who experienced it also lend the perspective. So it was the patients as well as the medical students. And then that helped, you know, kind of flush out the story along with the expert interviews that we had. So I just wanted to comment on that part.
Yeah, I mean, that was a reason it took so long. We knew we needed those patient stories in the
Yeah.
film. And we had been asking for years, but of course, when we started, there wasn't even social media, barely. That whole, I mean, just really the way you get information out changed so much in the course of making this film. So, today it's much easier to put something out and get responses, but it was a lot harder. And even sometimes when people did write in and said, this has happened to me, or I think that this has happened to me, they didn't necessarily want to speak on camera. And that's
True.
absolutely understandable. This is a hard thing to talk about, just as any kind of violation is hard to talk about. And it's not something everyone wants to share with the world. And of course, which is why the nurse in the film wanted her identity to not be disclosed. She felt that that would put her position at risk, and she's right. I mean, there's no doubt it would. I've heard enough stories about retribution towards people who speak out, and you even saw the things they said to Ari in the film, right? Oh, why do you identify with the patients so much? What's wrong with you? Maybe you're not cut out for medicine. I mean, that's the attitude, and it's horrific, and it's sadly it's not uncommon. And so we truly are using the film as an advocacy tool. We just got to have a really great stakeholders meeting this week with a whole slew of stakeholders in the state of Massachusetts, where we are working on legislation. And that's a big state because there's 4 major medical schools there, and there's other medical facilities and schools in the state. It's highly populated with medical students and personnel and teaching hospitals. So this is a really big state for us. We're very excited about this. We're working with some really committed legislators in the state of Massachusetts. And so we feel really good about it. We did, for anyone that doesn't know, we did just pass the strongest law in the country in Colorado. And we co-wrote that, our team co-wrote that with their team, with the legislators and their folks and some other stakeholders in the state of Colorado. And it has everything we want in these bills. And so that is now our model bill going forward. And we are working with the legislators in Massachusetts to strategize getting some amendments to get that bill stronger, because we didn't actually get to help write that one before they put it forward. So our job then as advocates is going to be to help craft a stronger bill and yet support the bill so we can get it passed in Massachusetts. So we're really using the film to change, do what we can to change this great behemoth, which is medicine. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate the comments in the chat. Amazing. Thanks for doing that work.
Just to pop in real
Yeah.
quick before we go to Jillian's question, which is basically what we're talking about right now. Her question is, what point did you realize that this was beyond making a film, but starting a revolution in medical training? Yes,
God, I love that.
I know. Answer that in 1 second, but I just want to kind of give a portrait of what exists right now. So when we started the film, when you started the film, I believe it was only illegal in 3 states for this to happen. Is that correct, Imagine?
Yeah.
And then when I started the film, 2016, it was only illegal in 7 states. Because of the Me Too movement, there was a big push, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. Now, thanks to Colorado, the one we helped write, we are at 23 states where this is illegal, but still not even half. So our goal is, and we've always thought of, has always been a goal of the film, is that we want to make this illegal in 50 states for this practice to happen. And so we are a very small team. We can only focus on so many states at once. So now we're going after the states with the most medical schools. So that would be Massachusetts, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Those are the 4 ones that have the medical schools, and then we have our fingers in a couple other states as well. And we feel that once we can get those medical schools, the states with the most medical schools to pass, hopefully it will be a domino effect, but you never know. Like when we first started talking to Colorado, they were like, oh, it doesn't happen here. So there's also that weird kind of, resistance. Either it's like, oh, we don't want to believe it's happening by the medical world, or it doesn't happen here because we have no medical schools. So it's an interesting dichotomy. But yeah. Do we want to
Yeah,
expand?
there's one medical school in Colorado. There's actually more than one, because there's DO schools here in New Mexico, but there's one major medical school here in New Mexico. I live in New Mexico currently. I'm working on a law here. And I thought smaller states would be easier. It's not necessarily the case, turns out. And I think a lot of it does have to do with, who the legislators are, how committed they are.
What district they're in?
What district the medical schools are in, who owes, who favors. There's just sort of a lot of those interworkings, and we're learning a lot. This has been a real crash course in amateur lobbying.
Yeah.
But I'm proud. I'm so proud of our team.
Yeah.
We've really done good work on this. We've got petitions up on change.org for both the New Mexico and Massachusetts law. If you haven't signed those, please sign them. And if you're in those states, or in any of the states that we're working in, having people come and testify is how we're going to get these changes, and get these laws taken really seriously. So that's what we're mobilizing for right now in Massachusetts. We were supposed to have our hearing next week, and it was postponed due to a fire they had in their state house the other day. So, and this is it. It's like we get it last minute, and then, but we're changing it, and it won't be till at least September now. So, but it's the long game. And, Jillian's question again is, at what point did you realize that this was beyond making a film, but starting a revolution in medical training? I don't know.
Like early on. Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
I mean, it always felt, like a social justice film, for sure. We always wanted the film to be something that would really create change. But I think as we started to see it come together, it became more clear what a tool it could be to really galvanize people, and motivate people. I hope, that's the goal. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely been on that train. But did I expect to be an amateur lobbyist? No, I definitely did not expect that was going to become a major part of my work, that I would be, even when we interviewed Dan McKay, who is the Republican senator in Utah in the film, Renee and I hung out with this guy for a whole afternoon. I don't hang out with Republican senators. I mean, that's just like, that's not really something I'm doing on a regular basis at all. But now I'm having a lot of conversations with legislators. They really value us. They see us as experts who can help them craft really good legislation. And that feels really good, to feel like these 18 plus years I've spent learning about this, that has really made me an expert. I would say one of the leading experts on this issue, is really useful. There's a lot that I can help with and share. And then we've also brought on Livia Fry, who worked on the Connecticut law, and it took her 4 years to get the Connecticut law passed. And anyone want to guess why? It's one word, it's 4 letters. It's a very big presence in the state of Connecticut. Rhymes with kale. So, no, tongue in cheek aside. And yeah, I mean, that was a reality in that state, that Yale put forward a strong campaign against the law. They had 2 female OBGYNs write op-eds for the New York Times. We sent in a rebuttal op-ed, or, you know, another perspective op-ed, and it didn't get published. But, you know, of course, Yale can get theirs published. So it's not really a fair fight. But Livia hung in there, and all of her, you know, advocates and stakeholders hung in there. And it took them 4 years, but they got that law passed. So Livia came onto our team. She's working with us on the legislative work now as well. So I really want to acknowledge her for her work in this too.
Yeah, once we found out about Livia, we were like, we need to find her.
We
And
need
that
to
was
talk to
actually
her.
through change.org
Yeah.
that happened. And so we will vouch that change.org actually does make a difference. You're never sure when you make those, you do those quick little petitions, but they're actually really doing good work, and have really helped us in some arenas.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say on the change.org thing, we had put up the New Mexico petition, and we've now got, I don't know where we're at now. It's like 158,000 signers or something. I don't know. It's something crazy. It's around 150,000 signers on that. And when we got over 50,000, that's when I got a direct message from one of my local legislators here in New Mexico that said, hey, if this is really a thing, we need to do something about it, and I want to talk to you. And I was like, yes, it's really a thing. And so that started the ball rolling. I mean, I come from states. I've lived most of my life in California, New York. I come from big states where that would never happen. So that was wild to me, that I was getting like a text message through a mutual contact from this person, from this legislator. And then we literally had lunch on Monday and started the process. Not going great, because I'm learning lots of things about, some of the nitty gritty politics here in New Mexico, which are challenging. Not the least of which is that legislators are not paid here in New Mexico. It is the only state that does not pay their legislators. And I think that's a huge, huge problem, and a different conversation for another time, but I will just drop that there as one of the major things that really needs to change here.
I wanted to go to
Yeah.
Amy's question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Amy asks, what seems to be the biggest hurdles with passing better laws? What are those arguments against better supportive laws? This is a great question, Amy. I imagine you've been working in the legislature more than I mean, I can, but I mean, part of the resistance is the medical schools. Number one, they don't want to be told what to do. They don't
And
want
the hospitals.
and the hospitals. They don't want to be regulated. We're also learning a lot about the medical industry in terms of, that's what I thought. Yep, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, this kind of I'm going to diverge the answer a little bit and talk about then who's showing up for the film and who we thought would show up for the film. I mean, of course, when we started making the film, we thought, oh yeah, OBGYNs, they're totally being supportive of this film. Actually not. It's the nurses and the medical students. And it's because they're on the more of the lower ring, and they're still, I think, altruistically believing that they can help people. And, they haven't been, I guess, maybe one might say, as some, not all, are a medical person that's been jaded and now is just kind of doing it for money or ease or whatever. So,
or just, I think, has been indoctrinated into the system, and we can talk more about that if that's interesting for people. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been interesting to witness, like who's showing up for the film, who believes in the film, who's fighting with us and who's not. So
yeah, I would say the thing we hear the most from OBGYNs and MDs in general is, well, I never saw this in my training, so clearly this does not happen. Which is a very bizarre response, in my opinion. Again, but I think that tells you something about their mindset. I'm curious what people think that says about them. Please write it in the chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. I mean, I think it puts them at the center of the universe. And, it's like, well, clearly, if I've not seen it in my training, it can't possibly be a thing. I mean, even Dan McKay in the film says, I've never seen a rape. I've never seen a murder. That doesn't mean they're not happening. It's the same thing. It's the same argument. And so it's very bizarre this idea that, well, if it wasn't in my training, then it just cannot possibly be a thing. Amy, yeah, you have your hand up. You are welcome to unmute and ask whatever or say whatever.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that, sorry, I'm getting really angry about the conversation because, yeah, it's shocking. It's shocking, but it's not surprising to me because I've worked in various fields that kind of connect this conversation. So I'm a sex worker. I'm a sexological somatic body worker. So we work with bodies and anatomy. And it's shocking to me that the medical industry does not teach about anatomy and specifically female bodies, female genitalia. And I was also a sexual assault counselor. So I was, counseling children, incarcerated adults, different diverse backgrounds. And that was also kind of connecting to the medical industry that was very shocking. Like people that were doing, same nurses that were doing rape kits, basically. There's only so much education that goes into that, and it's very limited and very narrow. And so, sorry, I don't want to go into all these other things that are connected, but I just wanted to say I'm not surprised and I'm sorry. And I'm so glad that you guys are doing this work because each one of us needs to connect these dots that are very connected, right? And it's such a big problem. It's a huge problem.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for all the work you are doing and have done. We appreciate you. Sexual assault advocates very quickly get what we're doing. That those have been our biggest allies so far, I would say, in our screenings and in the legislative work. Like the sexual assault folks are showing up. They get it. So that's like number one. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we're in such an interesting moment culturally right now where so many things are bubbling to the surface that are very related. We're seeing, this massive movement around Black maternal health and the horrific mortality rates that we have here in this country, which are unacceptable for any developed country like the United States that has as many resources as we have. So there's a major movement happening around that. I feel like there's been this major movement in birth and with birth activists trying to work to make birthing better for birthing people. That is still like, there's so much that needs to be done around birth. The consent violations that happen in birth are just astounding, and very run of the mill. I mean, really, it's very much how they do it in medicine when there's hospital births. Yeah, so there's so much we could say about that. If any of you have listened to the retrievals yet, also about Yale, by the way, that's about some, horrific things that happened at Yale in a fertility clinic there. And I won't spoil it for you, but essentially like, women who were coming in for this fertility treatment. I think there was like one non-binary person that was a part of this, primarily women that were coming in, were not believed when they experienced excruciating pain. No one investigated it. No one took it seriously. No one tried to figure out what was going on. And it was such a failure of the system. There's a whole reason why that happened. You can listen and you can find out. It's a New York Times podcast. I highly recommend it. Be prepared to be upset. So anyway, and then our film and this movement around non-consensual exams, which is now being called, rightfully so, medical sexual assault. Stephanie Tillman, who goes by the Feminist Midwife online, published a piece that just came out a couple months ago in the Feminist Bioethics Journal out of Toronto and at the University of Toronto. And she wrote a beautiful treatise on this. I mean, it's a 17-page, very well written, well documented, well researched piece about why we need to call this what it is, which is medical sexual assault. I am careful in the film how I talk about it. if you've seen the film, you notice that I'm not the one saying that. I want other people to talk about that. I want other people to say that because I want to work with these people, not because I don't think that that's the case. So at some point, I will probably speak more bluntly, more publicly, but at this point, we do want to work with these medical folks. We do know that if they feel like you're calling them a rapist, if you're, using language that to them is inflammatory, they will shut you down. They will not listen. They do not want to hear it. They are not open to that. So I don't think it always serves, but I do think it is very, very important that we do name this what it is. In any other context, it would be that. Absolutely. Like we can all see that someone's under the influence of a substance where they can't properly consent, or is asleep, for whatever reason, and something is inserted into their body like that. It's very clear what that would be anywhere else. So it's interesting, and I think maybe what Dan McKay says in the film is right, that, medicine is kind of the last bastion for this. Which is ridiculous because it's the place where bodies are dealt with as much as any other place. So
And where people put their trust, that's, I
Yeah.
feel like also a huge thing. Like such a trust in medicine and healthcare is violated to the point that some people who were in the film, Ashley in particular, says, she didn't trust medicine again for a while. And that's really the sad part, is that then people stop trusting, those that are supposed to be helping them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then obviously, as Amy points out in the chat, everything, of course, that's happening with abortion access, with our rights, with our reproductive rights, with reproductive justice. This is a reproductive justice issue. All of these things are reproductive justice issues. And again, I think it's always really important to acknowledge that it was women of color that started that movement. And that was out of the fact that the reproductive rights movement that was happening prior to that Renee and I were definitely involved in our early years, and some of us may be old enough that you remember as well. That movement was not addressing issues that were impacting women of color. And here we are 30 years later, almost 30 years later, really, from reproductive justice being coined, which was happened in the 90s. But like, here we are with a Black maternal health crisis in this country. I mean, it's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And of course, every outcome we look at, people of color, BIPOC folks are much more likely to experience worse realities, worse outcomes. And with this issue in particular, it is not in the film because this Hastings report just came out about a year and a half ago after we had locked picture. But this is 4 times as likely to happen to Black folks, Black patients, than it is to other patients. So that's important. And again, that's right in line with, everything else. So yeah, I'm just seeing some yes in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, that's another. So that's also an area where we're noticing that people are showing up as women of color that are involved in health, reproductive justice. They're also recognizing, because we talk a lot about the history of medicine and how women of color were used frequently and still are. So yeah, it's horrific that this is still happening.
Well, and it's, the thesis of the film really is that it's directly related to those origins of OBGYN and the horrific experimentations and violations, and certainly no consent whatsoever, of Black enslaved women. So this is a direct descendant of that. And until we really heal that origin story, this will not heal in medicine. It really will not. At this point, I really feel like I am an abolitionist around medicine. And I will keep working to make the system we have better, as long as it's a system we have, but I will be one of the first in line to to line up to create the new system. And I know there's different people working on that in different ways, and who knows what that could look like. But certainly we can do better than what we've done. And, you know, until medicine really reckons with those origins, it's not going to change. That's the reality. Going back to a comment Jillian made, I don't know what we're talking about now. Yes, especially in rural states where so much of the economy and medical care is reliant on teaching hospitals. It's very complex. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. There's so many folks that live rurally in our state here in New Mexico. There's many states with a lot of folks that have to travel quite far. And so yeah, a lot of times there's no option. And I've heard many stories of people saying they went in and they said, I don't want the medical student doing the thing, whatever the thing was, they wanted the medical student or the resident to do. And they were like, well, too bad. That's what it is today. And if you're just going to have to reschedule or schedule with a different doctor if you're not okay with that. That is not consent, folks. That is not consent. That's a really good example of what that is not. The hardship that puts on someone when you have planned for a procedure or you've traveled a long way because you live out, you know, of the city to get a procedure done, that is coercive. And so those are the kinds of things we want to shine a light on. This film, I feel like, is about more than what the film is about. You know, it's this broader approach to bodily autonomy that is really coming to the fore right now. It is about consent. It is about all of that. And I hope it can be a catalyst for other movement. Back to, I guess, just to finish answering some of Amy's questions. And if you have other questions, please pop them in the chat. We love your questions. And if anyone wants to unmute and talk, you are welcome. We would love to hear your voice. Just raise your hand and let us know. So what are those arguments against better supportive laws? Some of the arguments go like this. Oh my God, we just have so many consent things we have to do when someone's having a surgery. We couldn't possibly do another consent form, which, you know, consent is not hard. It's a conversation. It's creating clarity with your patient. And it is your job as a medical provider to get the consent of your patients for everything that you're doing with them. Their body is theirs, not yours. So again, it's like, it goes right to the heart of these matters of who gets to have that bodily autonomy. You know, who's in charge of the decision-making around one's body, who gets to consent, who's coerced into consenting, which is not consent. So I think that's a big one we hear. Certainly, I think they're worried that it's going to like change their flow, right? Because they've got a flow going. They're moving fast. Okay, students, come in here. Okay, glove up. All right, do an exam. Like it moves really fast. They do this stuff really, really fast. They're used to doing it.
Inefficient.
It would be
and
inefficient.
Convenient. Yes, which should not be the things that determine how they are trained. And Saber, it looks like you have a question. Was that correct?
Yeah, I do. Hi.
Hey, oh my gosh, hello.
Hey, how are
Good
you?
morning.
Good, it's good to see you.
I'm glad your film is finally out. I'm also a filmmaker.
Finally.
Saber and I've known each other a long time.
Okay.
From like our theater days back in New York.
Yeah. I haven't done theater in 20 years, but yes. So I had a question, comment. So sort of now I never knew there was such a thing until I saw their piece back 20 some odd years ago or whenever it was. And then, so ever since then, I've had to have 2 surgeries, right? Anyway, and so I'm always telling people about this, and especially I know like a lot of Black and queer people, and so it makes them freak out, right? And you know, even when I had to have elbow surgery, I was like, you're not gonna do that to me, or, you know, and I am a sexual abuse survivor, all that stuff from men and women, and so I'm very particular about my body being touched. And some hospitals, and I'm curious if they lie, because they were like, oh no, we don't do that at this hospital. And I was like, are you sure? Are they allowed to lie to people and say they're not doing something and doing it about these, you know, exams in particular?
I mean, are they allowed?
Yeah,
No.
legally.
Does it mean that they don't? I can't say that, right? I do
Okay.
think they obfuscate it a lot. I think they find ways sometimes, and I don't know how they spoke to you in your conversations. I do think sometimes they'll say, well, the student's just part of the care team. Like they kind of try to gloss over what the role of people in the room is. And one of the things, we're working with medical students. We're actually partnering with the American Medical Student Association, which is a very progressive organization.
Okay.
And we are having these conversations with them while they're still in it to help them learn how to be clear and learn that it's not beneficial to them or the patient for them to obfuscate what their role is. It's actually better for everybody to say, I'm a medical student, I'm here learning. If you're willing to help teach me today, I would love that. Otherwise, I'll just be observing if that's okay. And if it's not, that's okay too. It's like, and one of the things actually, Ari, who is a doctor in the film that did the initial research, he also found in his research, and it was kind of a different piece around that same time, that medical students were often introduced as student doctors. And that's a good example of this opaqueness that they often have. It's like, meet student Dr. Jessica, or whatever. And so what he found in his research is that the patient hears doctor. They don't hear student. They just think, oh, okay. So again, that it's like these little things they do to not be transparent. And so I think they have their different ways of doing that. When you find a doctor that's really clear and really transparent, like that's golden. And that really is what, and as Livia would say, that's just doing their job. We should not even be giving gold stars for that. Like that's them doing their job.
That's 101. And so also, I'm older now, and as I say, I'm a corporate whore because I mostly do conferences and concerts. So I have PPO insurance. So I don't run into, I guess I didn't know that it's only, and I've kept up on it, but I didn't know it was only student. Is it only student hospitals, or is it because if that's the case, I will make sure I tell everybody to avoid them. And in addition to working on legislation, but are they doing that outside of that? Is this insurance bias is what I'm also getting at, right? I mean, it seems like it partly is, because as I've gotten, like I said, as I've gotten older, I work, several jobs. So I have a different kind of insurance. And
Right.
so, and I noticed as soon as about, 7 years ago, when I got that different kind of insurance, how actually I was treated. I don't have to get a referral. I can just call up and say, okay, I need to go to the dermatologist. I need to go to podiatrist, whatever I want. And when I go in and talk to the doctor, I don't have to fight so hard. I'm like, just give me this medicine for this thing. Oh, well, I don't know. I was like, well, I want it. So just give it to me. So they'll give it to you. Right. Versus when I didn't have health insurance most of my life. And then, and I did have a hospitalization for a gallbladder thing. And it was before I knew about this film this process. And I was at a Brooklyn student hospital. And I thought about it later, and I was like, oh, I wonder if they, did any of that crazy shit to me, right? So again, is this also seems like, is it only student doctor teacher hospitals?
No, I would not say that it is. Here's the thing. A lot of most hospitals have some connection to some school. Not all of them, but some of them it's really clear, NYU Medical Center or whatever,
Right.
like it's clear that it's a teaching facility. But many hospitals work with preceptors, who, doctors who maybe are teaching at the local school or whatever. And then they have a deal where the students are coming on rotation. So there can be students in other settings if there's doctors in those settings that are affiliated with the school, even though the setting is not specifically. We have heard stories of this happening from small clinics all the way to larger teaching hospitals. I mean, it's not one kind of facility in which this happens. It definitely, I would say, primarily is going to happen in these teaching hospitals for sure. But I would not say that that's
limited to that. Yeah, it's not limited to that.
Okay.
And it's important to say, Yale as another example, we're really picking on them today a little bit.
That's okay.
Yale They're buying up. My understanding recently is actually that they're buying up all these small medical practices in Connecticut. So it's actually hard for people to go somewhere that's not Yale affiliated if they're a resident of the state of Connecticut now. So sometimes it doesn't even matter your insurance. Like the doctors or the facilities, it's not even available to you. But
worse.
I mean, I hear a lot of people around this, and I think you're leaning into this question of like, could this have happened to me? Like that's immediately what a lot of our viewers wonder. And yeah, I'm getting ready to have major gynecological surgery in a few weeks. I'm about to do this myself in a very ironic turn of events. So, and I'm okay, everybody. But yeah, it's it's understandable that people are going to ask those questions, and I can't answer that for anyone. I can't say what did or didn't happen. You could certainly reach out to the facilities to find out, were they doing this practice at that time? You could potentially get some information. It's generally not going to be in your chart, and it's not generally easy to find out. And I think they are getting a little more hip to the fact that they probably shouldn't just tell people that. Like we saw in Kaz's story in the film, where Kaz called the facility, and actually someone at the facility confirmed, yes, that was part of your procedure. So it takes us all being vigilant and vocal and doing exactly what you did. I mean, that's what I'm doing with my doctors. I'm having very clear conversations. How do you work with medical students? Like, ask very openly. How do you work with medical students? Tell me about that. Rather than do you work with them? Are they going to do this? Like, ask that open-ended question of like, tell me about your work with medical students.
I think also them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just them, these kind of conversations then create a situation where they know that they are being watched. They know potentially what's happening. So it's not like they can be as dismissive. It's really, on a side note too, on what has just been discussed, it's really interesting when we're at a Q&A or when I talk with people about the film, and I can literally see the wheels turning in their head. And I'm like, you're thinking about whether this has happened to you or not, right? And they're like, yeah. It's just like, you can see their the brains going on it.
I have something else to add. Okay, so anybody knows me knows I've been pretty radical for a very long time. I'm 51, to put it in context. And so I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, states where it's not passed yet, I know they have these anti-rape condoms where, like, if somebody with a penis tries to insert themselves into you, there's like, it's like basically barbed wire that catches your catches their penis. And I was like, maybe I should give these out to people. I was like thinking about that. And then I kind of felt a little bad, because I was like, well, maybe these students don't know. But that was like, well, I'm just trying to think of basically how can people block their vagina hole from being pushed into, you know what I mean? I mean, I think it's a conundrum that everybody with a vagina at some point has, right? Or has thought about, a lot of people, right? And then I was like, I don't know if that's very ethical. And I'm debating with myself, and I'm like, but what they're doing is not ethical. And I was like, but I don't want to scar people for life, but is it scarring them for life? And so I think it's like this swirl. So, I mean, is there something you can actually do to prevent unwanted penetration that I don't know about?
Well, I'm really glad you asked this question, because this kind of leads to what I think could be like the final topic is, what can you do? What can you do to prevent this from happening? What kind of conversations can you have with your doctor when you go to your gynecologist or when you prepare for surgery? So as we've mentioned already, having discussions with them that you're aware of it. You can write on your forms, you do not want anybody to do a pelvic exam on you. What are some of the other things that you and others have discussed? Imagine your most recent panel that was recorded.
Bringing someone with you, having an advocate with you, especially if you're someone that tends to get like what's often been referred to as like white coat syndrome. As soon as someone with a white coat is sitting there, you're like, it's hard to speak. It's hard to ask questions. You may not be your best advocate in those moments. So I think having someone else with you, having a witness to whatever the conversations are, having someone that can help you ask questions, can take notes, that can be really helpful. You know, and I just think being as clear as possible, you know, writing in on the consent form, there may not be a place for it, crossing stuff out, writing in what I'm okay with and what I'm not. And some people may be okay working with students. And then to say, if you are, how many, in what capacity? Do you want to meet them first? You know, what are the things you want around that? Like you get to make those choices. It's your body. You know, we showed in the film that there's very high statistics of people who will say yes, but they want to be asked. They want to be involved in that decision making. They want it to be their own decision. And so I think, you know, I think that's going back to the other question from earlier, like, what are the pushback? Oh my God, we're not going to have anyone for the students to learn on. It's just not true. The research shows it's just not true. There will be plenty of people that will say yes. You know, many people that will say yes for anyone that says no. And it's everyone's right to say no, period. So I think being as clear as you can, talking to all of the folks you're working with, making sure the care team is clear, is the best that we can do. That's why we are trying to get these laws in place. So there is, you know, the patient in Arizona who was the nurse, she went and talked once she knew this had happened. I mean, the resident told her they did it. So she knew from the horse's mouth. So she went and talked to 3 different attorneys and she had no legal leg to stand on because this specific practice was not considered illegal in the state of Arizona. So that's what we're working really hard on these laws around and really drilling down in them to be very specific about what needs to be on these consent forms, what the consent process needs to be. And also, I think important to say that we're asking for whistleblower protection for these students. You know, the students, in my mind, really, they are not the bad guy. The system is the problem. And the doctors that have been in the system for a long time that keep reproducing this process, you know, perpetuating it with every new generation of students, that is what needs to be addressed. These students are traumatized by this too. You know, not all of them are conscious about what they're doing. And I'm sure some of that's by design, like their mind is like, I can't think about the fact that this might be violating to patients. So I'm going to tell myself it's not. And that's what they are being told. They're being gaslit. Oh yeah. It's fine. They've consented. They blow it off when the students ask, you know, oh, well, did this patient consent to that? Oh yeah, it's fine. It's all in the consent form. They just kind of make it like, oh, no big deal. So a lot of these students, they are going in thinking there's consent. Some of them know, some of them do know, like, I don't think this is above board. And it doesn't feel good to them. And I think that there's tremendous moral injury that's happening to students. And so that's part of why we're also really working with students and student-run organizations to change it also from the bottom up. I think that this is really the proletariat of medicine. Like if they rise up and say, no, we're not doing this anymore, it will change. And that is, we're working on both angles. We're working on that legislative piece to give people that legal standing. And then we're working with the students. And I hope that we really get to work with the doctors and the facilities. So we'll see. We went off on a whole bunch of things there, but I hope that was helpful or answered somewhat your question. I wish I had a clear answer.
No, there's no clear answer in life.
I know. I wish it were clear. I wish it was like, if you do this, then definitely no. But so much hinges on people's ethics. And they're in a system that's from its origin unethical. So, and again, I'll just reiterate, until we reckon with that origin story, until we acknowledge the horrific violations that have been done, especially to people of color, people with disabilities, women, queer folks, people that just did not have the same access to resources at whatever time period. That's always been the way of medicine, is to use those folks to advance itself. And it has been at great cost to BIPOC folks in particular. And that is still happening today. And that gets to change.
Yeah.
Thank you for your questions. It's really great to see you.
Great to see you too. Thank you. And thank you for your hard work, and just let me know when I can actually purchase the film so I can share it with some others who can't make it out the film screenings.
Awesome.
Well, great question. We have a few more days left of our virtual online screening. It will end Sunday night, midnight Pacific time. So just share our link with your friends and they can watch it this weekend.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want them to see it.
I'll put the thank you. You beat me to it.
At
Website.
yourcervixmovie.com. That's where
Yeah,
everything
there
is.
you go.
And there's a lot of information there if people are interested in the advocacy work and the other initiatives that we're starting. Many of them are in their nascent stages, but you know, we see this as like, it's been the long game with the film. So it's going to be the long game, you know, with this as well. With all of the changes that we want to see the film make. We did get greenlit for PBS, really good news. We're very excited about that. We don't have dates yet, but it'll probably be later in the year next year. But until then, until that happens, we want people to see the film on our tours. We are doing an East Coast tour this fall. We are setting up East Coast screenings right now. So if anyone wants to help set up a screening or just be a part of one or invite people, just keep an eye on our stuff about that. More information will be coming about that. That'll be October, November. You know, and that'll be ongoing. So we're trying to get in front of the right audiences. We're going to be presenting at a major bioethics conference in the fall as well. We're really excited about that, to, you know, sit with bioethicists and really talk about this issue and drill down about it. You know, we're working on as many fronts as we can to get a new conversation happening. So, yeah. Any other questions from anyone before we close out? I know people are having to go. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for joining us. And if you're watching on recording, hope that this was helpful. Yeah, it's been a real labor of love. I mean, you know, I would not have stuck with this film this long, you know, if I didn't believe in it so much, and if I didn't know how much of a need there still was for it. And that's the unfortunate thing. You know, new research just came out showing that 84% of students had done this at least once. And that was across 6 states or 5 states and 6 different institutions. So that's brand new as of just the end of last year. So a lot of times people want to say, oh, the research is old. This isn't a thing anymore. It is. We have new research that shows that it's a thing. And I'm grateful to those students who have answered those surveys, who have spoken about their experiences. We would not even know about this if it were not for them. And students like Ari, who did the research. So really, really grateful to them. And we want to empower the students just as we want to empower the patients in this, because what's happening to them isn't okay either. They don't even get to consent to their own education. You know, that's not okay either. And so, of course, if you're training them from this place of you don't get to consent, you don't get to be a part of the process or have a say in the process, then of course, then we're training them to be providers that are going to treat their patients that way. And we have to really look at that. So, any final parting words? My work wifey, my co-pilot.
I mean, you've been killing it on this this call. I'm like taking notes over here. No, I feel like we've touched about most of the points that we need to talk about. And just want to thank you for those that have showed up today, and thank you if you're watching in the future. And we just hope that this film inspires you to be proactive about your own personal medical care, about your body autonomy, about consent, and about any other social justice changes in the world that you're desiring to make. This has been a real, as Imagine said, labor of love, but it's also just so gratifying and rewarding that our film is actually making a difference. It's a lot of work, but we're doing it, and it's going to keep doing it. And a lot of that is because of many people like you, our community who are showing up, medical students, doctors, everybody, patients. So it's just a reminder that change is possible, and we can make it happen as long as we put our mind to it.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you everyone so much for being here. We appreciate you. Thanks for being a part of this community. please get in touch if there's anything you want to work with us on. You want to set up a screening, you know, someone who wants to sponsor our PBS broadcast, definitely talk to us. We're open to all those conversations.
Absolutely.
We are a very small team, but we are committed and we will be here. We will be here. So thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.
Bye.